Let's go ahead and get the next slide. You remember I showed last week the 9906, pastor lifting up his hands, and he vowed in Daniel 12:7 is 3:2:2. This is where he lifted up holy hands that Daniel saw and heard.
But the authority now, by the authority, listen to me closely, by the authority invested in me by Yahshua, under the direction of the Holy Spirit, I do announce to all who can hear that I, Israel Hawkins, the last day's witness, do loose the four messengers of the nations spoken of in the Revelation 6, 7, and 9 for the purpose of fulfilling that hour of trial, that time season of trial, which will now come upon all those who dwell upon the earth, to prove that governments of the people and by the people do not bring peace. It will be for a time and times and the divided time when Yahweh will have accomplished pouring out His power through His holy people. All these things will be finished. Praise Yahweh.
Okay, so let's go to the next slide. And I will show you what I didn't show you last week. I did show you the next slide. Okay. I showed you future day was 996, but I didn't show you the rest of it. That number 121 is referring to, if we can get this displayed, it's referring to where pastor began the vow in verse 121. Notice that? From the sermon on 9906. That word 726 in the middle is from 5375 NASA, which means to show, showed, shows, swore, and sworn. Remember, he was swearing. He was making a vow. In fact, the interlinear uses the word swear. And then the 996, don't forget what that 996 means. It means explain, give an understanding, teacher, instruct, wise man, mark, make to understand. In 996 in the Greek, a helper, help, aid. From 995, a cry, shout, to call out, shout, call aloud, proclaim, crying, loudly declaring, speaking with a loud, strong voice. Does that remind you of somebody? Okay, so when you add up the numbers there in future day, you get 1843 and it's from 3045, and it means to declare, instruct, to make made it known, show, teach, tell, come to give knowledge. And then 1843 in the Greek is promise. This is exactly what you saw taking place just now before your eyes in that clip. Can I have my next slide? But let's go even further now. Let's prove it even more. In Daniel 12:7 it says, "Then I heard the man clothed in linen, who on that future day is teaching." Well, I showed you last week future day is 996, but notice man clothed in linen Daniel heard 996. Wow, another coincidence, another amazing coincidence, right? Can I have my next slide? In fact, he talked to Daniel all throughout. I think it started in chapter 8 of Daniel, this man of Yahweh that Daniel kept seeing. In Daniel 10:5, he said, "I lifted up my eyes and looked and beheld a certain man clothed in linen, whose waist was belted with gold of Uphaz." Notice, man clothed in linen that Daniel beheld, 322. Pastor's tag. Okay, and then 322 means after time to come. It also means, that's not in order there, but it means to show forth, to show clearly, and to exhibit. That's what 322 means. And then 1151 there, that third number means son of my people. Son of my people. Okay? All right, now let's go to the next slide. If we put in those definitions that I just read you that about this son of my people and clearly showing and exhibiting, and you get 1011. Well, the man clothed in linen / Daniel is also 10:11. So what is that referring to? Well, it's referring to Daniel 10:11, where it says, "And he said to me, O Daniel, a man greatly beloved, understand the words that I speak to you. I, Yisrael Hawkins, speak to you, and stand upright on your feet, for unto you, Daniel, have I, Yisrael Hawkins, been sent." Okay, now remember, don't get in your mind that Yisrael Hawkins was alive at that time. Okay, that's not what Daniel saw, and I'm going to show you what he saw. Just be patient. So let's go to the next slide. On the sea of glass, 996. On the sea of glass, 996. Well, that first number 166 and on the sea of glass means to be clear. You know, like crystal clear? Remember that crystal clear LCDC? Is it LCDC or what do they call those things? Liquid crystal? I'd be like the ultimate liquid crystal display, okay? That's what he saw there. Now, 995, I told you already, meant to explain, to give you an understanding. 996 is from 995, means wise man, make to understand. Remember, he came to make Daniel understand. 996 in the Greek, again, meant help, helper, crying out. And then that third number, 563, means a lamb. Because remember, the lamb was also in the midst on this sea of glass. If you'll read Revelation chapter 4, and also Revelation 15 and other places where the sea of glass is spoken about. This lamb, okay, that's working with pastor at this time. And it's from 559 to utter, said, say, address, plainly says, promised, tell. Remember, television? We'll get to that in a minute. Now, what's really interesting is, if you'll notice the interlinear there of Daniel 9:22, that word number 559 is used. So is 995, which comes from 996. So is 998, which comes from 996 and 995. That many words in one scripture showing these things. And then Strong's Greek 1725, if you add these numbers up, it means before, in the presence of Yahweh, in front of. Remember where that sea of glass is? Let's go to the next slide. If you go on Yisrael Hawkins says, and you type in sea of glass, but don't put in C like a SEA, put SEE. You'll get one page of references. Put all those in the Yahmatria just the way they are and watch what you'll get. 2379 means sight, visibility. From 2370, to see, behold, looking, saw, have a dream, gaze upon. From 2372, behold, envisioned in visions. Look, prophesy, gaze, sees, have a vision of, look. Let's go to the next slide. Now, let's listen to Pastor's words from the 17th book of Israel, chapter 9, verse 5, where he says, right now you're sitting on this sea, which means he can see. The sea of glass, which is crystal clear to him. He can see crystal clearly all of your moves, all of your actions, your words, and what your tongue is doing to either build or destroy his work. Now, when you put in the C/sea of glass, notice what number you get again. 996, the date Pastor lifted up his hands and made that vow. Because that's where he did it. It was on the sea of glass. 166, remember, meant to be clear. And then 966 with all of its meanings of explaining and instructing, which Pastor was doing to Daniel to make him understand. And then that third number, 573, means true. Faithfulness, truth, verity, right, true witness, to be certain, to be firm or faithful, steadfast, established, trusty, verified. From 541, turn to the right. From 3225, right hand, the very word used in Daniel 12:7, where it says he lifted up his right hand and his left hand toward heaven and made this vow. So let's continue here. Next slide. Okay. This is from the 17th book of Israel, chapter 1, verse 39. Pastor says, in Daniel's day, Daniel saw this. He was actually witnessing this on the sea of glass and had before him on the sea of glass the witness. He saw the one who wore the linen, he said, explaining things to him. And Daniel was writing them down just as they were being explained to him by Pastor. Notice, Daniel wrote all that he said, 322. Wow, Pastor's tag. Notice your tag's not coming up. I mean, personally, my tag number on my car, it never comes up. I don't care, because I want to be tagged with that man, okay? So, let's go to the next slide. This is from the 16th book of Israel, Sea of Glass, chapter 35, verse 44. Pastor says, "And before the throne there was a sea of glass like crystal." This is to show you, now I'm making it clear as crystal. Remember that. That's what he said. Israel making it clear as crystal, double 2100. Show forth, show clearly, exhibit. That's what his tag 322 means. It's also 2100. Wow, what a coincidence, right? 2100 means to flow, flowed, flowing, flows, to flow freely as water. Well, that should remind you of Revelation 21, where it says, "And he showed me a pure river of water of life, clear as crystal, proceeding from the throne of Yahweh and of the Lamb." Let's go to the next slide. Now, Pastor, Revelation 21, when you put in Revelation 22:1, and what I just read you about this river, you get 3700. 3700 means to appear, to look at, behold, look, see. Notice how that keeps being used? What a coincidence. Allow oneself to appear, to gaze with wide open eyes as it's something remarkable. Now, keep in your mind, 37 years ago, this last week, the House of Yahweh was established, okay, in 1983. 37 months ago, this sermon about the Sea of Glass that I'm reading from, 12/24/16, Pastor gave that sermon. Genesis 49 was written in 1689. Remember Pastor's vision, the donkey vision he had in 2011? Genesis 49 was written in 1689. If you add 2011, you get 3,700 years, okay? Because he saw clearly this vision, this donkey vision over the homestead. You all remember that? Because Pastor or Yahweh and Yahshua can send these pictures from the Sea of Glass and transmit them to us. So notice, from the time Pastor vowed on 9/9/06 to today, it's exactly 4,900 days. Exactly 700 weeks. Genesis 49, right? Let's go to the next slide. Israel's teachings are clear as crystal. First number is 2370. It means see, behold, gaze. The same word I just read you. To envision in visions, to look, to prophesy, to gaze, have a vision of, contemplate with pleasure. 2333 means life-giving. Oh, didn't we just read about a life-giving river? Clear as crystal, proceeding from the throne and the Lamb? A life-giving living place from 2332, life-giver, to show, to tell, declare. From 24:21, live, to nourish up, make alive, repair, restore, give promise of life, to quicken, preserve alive, to revive, to resurrect. At this time of the resurrection that this is speaking of here, to be whole. And now you remember, when Pastor gave this sermon on 12/24/16, the day before, they passed Resolution 2333 in the UN, trying to get this peace plan, force this peace plan, remember the Oslo, to get it going again. And then we gave all those sermons about to television, and about television, and the Sea of Glass, and all these other things. That resolution was passed the day before Pastor talked about this Sea of Glass. Notice, liquid crystal display on Sea of Glass, 2334, the same number as that resolution. And I think my series of sermons at that time was called A Higher Resolution. Let's go to the next slide. That Security Council resolution, by the way, go ahead and load the whole thing in Yahmatria and notice what you'll get. It means a muddler, to stir up, disturb, trouble, troubler, to roil the water, to disturb or afflict. And then 3550 from 3584 means priest, to minister in the priest's office. 3550 in the Greek means a legislator, lawgiver. And then 2956, the third number, means to pursue, chase, follow close, be continuous. And then the meeting number was the 7,853rd meeting of the UN, which means Satan. Wow, what a coincidence, huh? Let's go to the next slide. Do you remember? Television 828. Television man 996. Okay, just add the word man there, and you'll see the television man on the sea of glass that Daniel saw. Let's go to the next slide, if that's not marvelous enough for you. Remember, this is the month of marvels, right? Next slide, please. 16th book of Israel, chapter 42, verse 9 and 10, from 12:24:16, Pastor says, what's marvelous to me is whether you know it or not, you're all standing on the sea of glass right now. I know physically you're not, but Yahweh has images of you there on that sea of glass. He says, I'm going to skip down. The marvelous thing is he had the sea of glass there before the world began. And he shows also that this sea of glass that it was on actually has all these things shown on it. And this particular group, who Yahweh shows, is Yahshua, myself, and the house of Yahweh. We're on that sea of glass. Notice, Pastor said, it's marvelous to me, 1074. From 12/24/16 to today is exactly 37 months, or not exactly, but it's got 15 days out of it, but I told you it was 37 moons. Next slide. Now look at this. The man of Yahweh that Daniel had seen, 322, his tag. Let's look at these other numbers. It means to show forth, show clearly, to exhibit. That's what 322 means. 1932 means he himself far. Like far in the distant future. 2398 means purifies, cleansing, make reconciliation, purge, to purify. Remember this man dressed in linen who's going to purify us through these teachings that Daniel talked about in Daniel 12. But now watch this. When you add up the numbers, you get 4652, and it means a wondrous work, a miracle, to be surpassing or extraordinary, marvelously, wonderful works, wondrously, marvelous, show marvelously. 4652 in the Greek means an outline, an image cast by an object and representing the form of that object opposed to the thing itself. Notice what Pastor just said? It's your image on that sea of glass. It's not you, it's your image. Can I have my next slide? Load in that scripture that he just said and look what you get. 8088 means proclamation. It means announces, loud sounding, understanding, witness. 4852 means freedom. Yes, he gives you freedom from the gods. But that third number, 5489, means read by ellipsis of 3220. In other words, they say that read should actually be 3220, not the word read. So it goes to 3220, which means see. Also means western. And that's Pastor's tag too, isn't it? If you drop the zero. Can I have my next slide? Marvelous to me, the marvelous thing. This is the month of Yahshua, and the characteristic of Yahweh that's displayed this month is doing marvels. Well, let's look at this. 396 means to eat freely. It's what we're all doing here. We're eating and drinking freely. 2376, the second number, means vision, appearance. See, behold, witness. To see, behold, envision and visions. Look, prophesy, gaze. Have a vision of, look. Now notice, Yisrael Hawkins, Daniel, the sea of glass, is the same number, 2376, that I just read about the visions. Notice, a sea of glass like crystal and mingled with fire that's spoken of in Revelation 15:2 is also 2376. And then the third number, 2814, means a vine, that's Yahshua, the Lamb. Branch, that's Pastor, the chosen branch, and the branches. Remember, that's us. But we're not the chosen branch. He's the chosen branch. Can I have my next slide? Okay, when we add all these things... Oh, wait a minute. Let's see. What is this? Oh, okay. Pastor says in the 16th book of Israel, that same chapter, he says, but if you can think of that number 17, It was also on that stone Yahweh gave to me, and he said, this is your lot. 17, 28, and 74 were the three numbers that were on that stone, and he said, this is your lot. That was found this week in the scriptures. I got so excited and I cried, and I thanked Yahweh for it. When you add up those numbers, marvelous to me, the marvelous thing, you get 5586, and it means divide up from 5585, branch. And then 5586 in the Greek means the stone of acquittal. It's the word that's used in Revelation 2:17, that white stone that Pastor was just talking about in this very sermon, right before he mentioned about the wondrous thing that Yahweh was doing. Could I have my next slide? All right, now let's tie this in with this. We just had an anniversary the other day, right? The 37th anniversary. Remember, he said, I saw myself, Yahshua, and the house of Yahweh on that sea of glass. Put in myself, Yahshua, house of Yahweh, you get pastor's tag, 322. And that other number, 2990, is from 2986, and it means Yabal. Does that ring a bell? Yabal, you know, the water courses that's spoken of in what's that booklet? House of Yahweh Established, thank you. Isaiah 44:4 is where it's used, by the way. That very word, Yabal, water courses. Can I have my next slide? Now get this. So from the day the house of Yahweh was established on 2/4/83 to 2/4 of this year, 2020, was exactly 37 years, but notice, it was 444 months exactly. Didn't we just see that number, 444? Wasn't it had to do something with water courses, Isaiah 44:4? And notice, when you put in Isaiah 44:3 and 4 in the Yahmatria, you get the date that the house of Yahweh was established. 2/4/83. Wow. For I will pour water upon him who's thirsty, you know, that water, that life-giving water, and floods upon the dry ground. I will pour out my spirit on your seed and my blessing on your offspring. They will spring up among the grass as willows by the water courses. And on page 67, Pastor talks about Yabal and Abel being a root word. Okay, I'm almost done. Next slide. I got two more things here. Okay, so from 2/4/83 to 2/4 this past week, 2020, it's 13,514 days. 37 years, 444 months. When you put in the 13,514th day, you get 512. Remember, Yahweh's in full control, right? 444 months in Yahmatria is 1967. And on page 21, Yahweh started stirring on the house of Yahweh established. Pastor says Yahweh started stirring his house to be established in 1967, laying the groundwork for his prophecies to be fulfilled. In 1967, I came to Abilene, Texas. And finally, the last slide, 37th anniversary in Yahmatria. Remember, 37 is also 777. If you remember, Pastor wrote The Mark of the Beast in 1976. 37 years later, we had the gold feast at 2013. Remember, 37 is gold, 37, 777. But when you put in 37th anniversary, it means from 183, 339 from 183. Remember that road he started out on? It means to desire, to crave, to long for, greatly desire, lust after. 339 in the Greek means to set up. Yes, he set up this work all the way back in 1961. Strong's Hebrew 2034 means to overthrow, to tear down, to pull down. Remember, that's what he's been sent to do, to overthrow this kingdom of God worship, to pull down their altars in their minds. You know, this God worship. That's what he was sent to do. 2034 is from 2033 in the Greek, means seventh, Yahweh's perfect finished work. The third number, 3091, means Yahshua. Yahweh is salvation. Yahweh will save his people from their sins. And then 3191 in Greek means lot, lots, from 3875, covering, to envelop, cleave, stick to a thing. And I would definitely suggest that we all stick to and cleave to this last day's work. You're in the right place, right? And you're on the sea of glass. If you'd all please stand, you're on the sea of glass. Yahweh's well aware of everything you're doing, everything you're saying. Okay? So let's make sure everything we do and say is in line, right, with the word of Yahweh. At this time, it's my great honor and privilege to present to you a great priest in Yahweh's house, the great Kohan Ilya Hawkins.
Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Please be seated. Of course, continuing on with the news, these are things that we need to bring to mind how Pastor has taught us these things for many years. And one thing that we need to understand that, and he said this before, just because we don't believe it will not stop it from coming. And of course, it starts out with the coronavirus and the way it's spreading. You know, one thing they're saying now, the coronavirus is not just respiratory, but it's also being found in the intestines. And if you remember what the House of Yahweh has brought for many years about the filth that you can go through in a grocery store and what's on the shopping carts, it becomes very easy to spread these things with not just moisture from the mouth alone. But also as we go through this food market they show, because they're saying this is linked from animal to human. So there's a combination that has been tried to put together that has had a negative reaction. And this is what Yahweh said in Leviticus 11, these animals you shall not touch, nor shall you eat. Stay away from these, speaking of their carcasses. But they've turned them into food. They went against what Yahweh said. Someone said, did Yahweh say this? Well, you won't die. Look at me. I'm eating it too, and I'm not dead. But the reason I want you to see this, we want you to see this, you're going to see snakes, rats, bats. They talk about eating cats and dogs and boar. Because when you walk through the grocery stores, as you can recommend it, you know, as you walk through the valley of the shadow of death, remember Leviticus chapter 11 doesn't say, well, the pig and the lobster and the shrimp in the United States is cleaner than the dogs and the cats and the bats in China. The same rule governs it all. And when you see a snake hanging and people buying the meat or eating the dogs or the cats or the rats that have been barbecued, that's no different than the things that you're walking through your local grocery store that's hanging over on the aisle or in the meat market, in the freezer section. It's the same rule that governs that. And think about how much stuff can you actually go in and buy in a grocery store that's clean. So next time you go in a grocery store and you see something unclean, compare it to the dogs and the cats they're eating, the shrimp, the lobster.